me to mark that off. All right, welcome back to Reading Homeschool Connection Night. Unfortunately, this is Homeschool Connection Night for the year. We will get into why that is by the end of the night, but just want to give you a heads up at the beginning that this is going to sadly be the last Reading Homeschool Connection Night, but there will still be math and there will be a social studies one coming up in May, but I'll get into that at the end. Tonight's goals are to review the benchmark that we just taught on Friday. Some students finished it up on Monday. We'll talk about main idea and summarizing. We have already talked about main idea. Summarizing is kind of the next step in main idea, so we'll kind of go over that. We'll talk about context clues, and we will talk about word reference materials, which basically just means dictionary, glossary, and thesaurus. So as usual, this workshop is going to help you guide in review for the reading quizzes with your child. We haven't, taken one in a while because of bench and other extenuating circumstances that have come up. But we are getting into what is so affectionately known in Virginia as testing season with the yes. Those of you who are watching at home, I have air quotes. Feel free to take notes, and we're going to be going over test concepts and test questions in general. One thing that's going to be different from this night than other nights. In other nights where I was using tests that we have taken as examples was what the Virginia Department of Education supplied as things that were commonly missed last year from fourth graders, and I use that kind of as a basis for tonight's. I actually have a link in this presentation at the end that if you want to download this at home, you can actually go to that presentation and use that for further resource. So the first thing we're going to talk about is benchmark review. And overall, in my mind, with the class improved tremendously. You'll see a lot of the red and the orange is with the grammar skills, which we will continue working on in class. But the one things I do want to know, the things that we've been working on in Homeschool Connection Nights, which are inferences, cause, effect, author's purpose, we see right here. Author's purpose, 86% of the class got that correct. Inference, 2% of the class got that right. 86 and 77 got author's purpose correct. 95% of the class got the cause and effect question correct. That's 82. We see those scores in the beginning of the year were hovering around 50, 60. They've now jumped tremendously. That's due in part to really stressing that in class, students working harder, taking it a little bit more seriously, looking back, proving their answers. For this benchmark, I didn't allow them to actually press the submit until I personally clicked through their test, all 44 questions of it, and made sure that they had proved their work on each and every single question. I won't on the SOL for two reasons. One, it's illegal for me to touch their computers during the SOL, and two, I actually won't even be in the room. Mrs. Falkenstein will be proctoring their SOLs, and I'll be proctoring her SOLs. There was an incident in our county last year where a teacher did ethical things with their students. So now the whole county, we're not allowed to proctor our own students. So I won't physically be in the room. I told the students that I want to get them prepared ahead of time. I don't want it to, come to SOL test day and be like, all right, I'm dropping you guys off here. I'll be back in a couple hours. But just really work with them at home. Someone to know that I would be in the room with them. Just tell them that even though I'm not in the room, it shouldn't affect their abilities, so on and so forth. So you see other than the grammar-related questions, we see no one in the whole class got the adverbs, adjective questions correct. Honestly, adverbs and adjectives, me as an adult, I sometimes screw those up. We'll hit that again. Guide words, this is the one surprised me the most. Every single morning, that's question number 43, only 23% of the class got that. Most every single morning in class when they walk in, their morning work is I give them a word on the board, and I tell them a set range of pages that could be on in the dictionary, and they find it. So basically, they've had 100-odd days to practice using guide words. And it was very surprising to me that little of the class had actually gotten that correctly. So we're going to kind of talk on that, how you can prove that at home.
Is that what you call the dictionary?
Yes, dictionary, and that's we'll get into that. That's the third part of our presentation tonight. One skill, the sequencing, that is a skill we kind of worked on in the past. We see only about half the class had gotten that question correctly. That was a sequencing box. That was number 37. it was a sequencing box that gave them 4 boxes, 3 of them filled in. They had to figure out what went in the middle boxes. So I required them to look back in the story, try to figure where those events were, and then pick which event fit in there. We see here they had 4 stories last advisory. They had 3 stories. Like I said, the SOL, I have no idea how many stories they will have. I think last year it was somewhere between 9, not necessarily 9 long stories. Some of them were poems. Some of them were just short stories. But we see this was a pretty even mix. We had a nonfiction story, a fiction, a report that included a lot of grammar stuff for them to correct in there. We had a thing about directions. They will most likely see a directions where it gives them a direction on how to make a craft or how to, I don't know, do something. And they have to answer questions based on that. And then the last couple questions were just assorted grammar questions. So test fatigue is still kind of a factor. Will continue to be. There's really no way to get them better at that than throw more tests at them, which I'm not a huge fan of because I feel like that loses a lot of instructional time. But we see not a lot of red, then a little bit more red, a little bit more red, and then a lot of red. That's basically, as they're going on through the test, they're getting tired of taking that test, and I don't blame them. Just to watch them take the test, let alone for them to actually take the test. We will see they are also overall better with fiction stories than nonfiction stories. While this has 2 reds, there are more yellow and white there. That has a little bit more orange. That's just ways that I look at it. And like I said, the grammar skills is where the majority of the class had lost any sort of points. We see 45 writing or editing skill. A lot of the orange relates to grammar skills, which are that can be due to any number of things. Kind of just depends how students are raised and taught. Of course, that's not good grammar there. If their teachers know how to use good grammar, that's a big problem.
Talk too good.
Yeah, if I don't talk no good there, that's why they. I'm just going to go to the next slide at this point. All right, so the first skill we're going to talk about tonight is main idea and summarizing, which are kind of interrelated skills. We had talked on main idea again, so pretty much I almost cut and paste from one of the original nights. Main idea is hard for some students, but it is developing as we go out throughout the year. They are getting better at not focusing in on just details, kind of thinking overall, what's the big picture? What is this trying to tell me? Rather than, oh, that dog had brown fur. I think that's what the whole story is about. They, at this point, realize, oh, it's all about the dog, not just the brown fur. They're not lasering in on the details as much anymore. They do, and then summary is kind of the next level of the main idea. So the students will have to pick the best summary of a story, which is basically, they might give them a couple paragraph story, and they may give them like 2 sentences or so, and say which is the best summary. Or the other thing is that they might say, here's a couple sentences, which one wouldn't belong in a summary? So those might be sentences that are actually in the passage, but are just extra interesting details. They aren't important to figure out the difference between interesting passages or interesting sentences in a passage and important sentences in a passage. Mistake, first and foremost, is always going to be not rereading the section that's indicated for them to find main idea. If it says what's the main idea of paragraph 4, first thing they should know is go back and reread paragraph 4. I noticed that a lot lately when we've been taking reading quizzes, when I don't allow them to be done until I see for every single question. Then they do have paragraph 4 highlight or circled, highlighted sometimes. Sometimes they run into the problem where they just want to color in paragraph 4. But that is a huge thing, making sure that even if they might have just gone back and gone through the motions to highlight paragraph 4, as they're highlighting, they're picking up on the words, so they are kind of still rereading it. My hopes are that they are actually rereading it as they go on. Focusing on one small detail, not looking at the big picture. Kind of go back to my dog example. They might focus on the brown fur and not thinking about the dog in general. They are getting better at that. That's not as prevalent of a problem anymore, but it will occur here and there as we go throughout. Finding some interesting facts and not necessarily important. That's what I'm talking about. Example, if the whole thing's about the dog and then it just randomly kind of talks about the owner of the dog and what the owner of the dog does, yeah, that's interesting. It's kind of important to know. But if they're talking mainly about the dog, it's not really important to know that. So while I ever hesitate to say whatever you read isn't going to be important, there's a big difference between important and interesting. I like that. One of my books I read, I don't know if it was in college or just teaching book, that they said like everything that an author writes is going to be either important or interesting, because that's a better way of saying important and not important, because then students might get in the habit of saying, well, not everything's going to be important. If you present it as interesting and important, they're going to be encouraged to read it because interesting is a cool word. So this kind of reiterates what I'm saying, that they will finally sometimes find a detail in that section and latch onto that and think that it's the idea. They'd always need to ask themselves, especially with any question about main idea or summarizing, is this what the passage is mostly about? Or does this retell those mostly, mainly? Those are going to be good clue words for main idea. If what their chosen answer is not what the whole section or paragraph, page they're reading isn't about, they're most likely wrong. They need to be able to answer that question, is this what it's mostly about? And then whatever answer that answer is what it's mostly about, then they're right. It's a good quick check for them to figure out. So main idea and summarizing questions are going to be worded on a test in a number of ways. I copied this directly from the Department of Education website, so you can pretty much bet your bottom dollar, if you're going to be Orphan Annie, that all of these things are going to be, these kind of questions, those sentence headings, stems, whatever you want to call them, are going to be what they're actually going to see on the other wall. So as you're reading with your child, I would recommend keeping this alongside with you, or downloading it and printing it in a bigger format, and use these as specific questions to ask your student, because that's going to get them hearing those different questions. The first one is, what is the best main idea or summary of this paragraph? Pretty straightforward. They know, they see main idea, they need to. What is the least important information to include in a summary of this paragraph? So that's going to get into that interesting and important information. Which idea from paragraph into a summary of this story? So it's saying from a specific paragraph, what's like the most important thing to include if you want to go to summary of the overall story. It says the sentence that is the best summary of paragraphs 2 through 4, what have you. So I'll give them 4 different sentences. They have to figure out what's the main idea. Summary and main idea are basically just 2 ways of saying the same thing. Just like a couple weeks ago when we talked about inferences and conclusions, 2 ways of basically saying the same skill. They're just represented in 2 different standards. Not a huge difference between them. Select the details that are most important to include this summary. That's gonna, I think I have an example of showing that. It's gonna give them a couple details from the story. Most likely all details will be in from the story, so they can't just rely on the looking back and finding those in the story, because if they look back, they'll find all 4 details. They need to figure out which ones are the important details and not the ones that are just interesting. And what's the best summary of the bulleted list? It might give like how to make a cake, and it'll give like directions or ingredients needed, and it'll say summary is this is how you make a cake or something along that line. So they would have to figure out the list versus from a whole story. So these are from the Department of Education. What it says here is read the second stanza from the poem, and then the question is the main idea of the stanza. It's a pretty straightforward question. It's just asking what is the main idea. They don't need to latch onto any clue words or anything like that. They just need to recognize that they need a main idea. Correct answer here is the speaker becomes eager as she is thinking of her friend's possible hiding places. And so that's the main idea, because if we read this, it says 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 3, 4, 5. I start to rush, thinking of where I look for first. The rose bush is lowest in a pile of leaves next to that parked car behind the swing set in the backyard. So overall, she up here is saying she's starting to rush, which rushing generally means you're excited, you're eager, or you're taking the test and want to get done with it. And then they're talking about possible hiding places: leaves, parked car, swing set. The overall poem is about hide and go seek. This is just a selected one stanza, fancy way of saying paragraph in a poem. So then the second answer says several children have chosen hiding spots and they are waiting to be found, and that's true. That Lewis is in his leaves. Someone's next to the parked car. Someone's in a swing set behind the backyard. That's true. They are hidden in places, but that's only talking about those 2 lines. That's not looking at the whole big picture. The first 2 lines talks about her counting. She's thinking where she looks, so that would be latching onto just some details. The speaker thinks that counting without peeking is the most difficult part of playing hide and seek. Again, that's kind of latching onto the first 2. Right here, you showing it's a stylistic thing. 1, and then kind of a pause. 2, then a kind of pause. 3, 4, 5. So she is speeding up, you can kind of summarize. So they have to rely on background information. They've ever played hide and go seek. That's my personal least favorite part of hide and go seek is the counting part. But that would be latching onto pretty much just that first sentence and not looking overall. And
Same for the last one.
yeah, if the children do not hurry to a hiding spot, they will be found quickly and then be out of the game. So it's all, you see all four answers latched onto just different parts, but the first answer latched on, well, not latched on, looked at the whole big picture. And so that's what we need the students to really do, look at the whole big picture, realize that all four answers, or however many answers they give, are most likely going to have different things about all of those. It's going to relate to the question, but they need to make sure they're finding the main idea. Another couple of ways that they might see this, they might see it in the graphic organizer where they would have to complete the graphic organizer or the web. So this would follow a passage. This, I believe, was a nonfiction passage about an ulm, which it said that it's small limbs, less than 1 foot long, white skin, underdeveloped eyes. So it's giving them all the details. They need to figure out what's that all leading to. So they need to ask themselves, are they talking about a trilobite's appearance? No, I don't even remember in the passage if they're talking about what a trilobite is. How to live in a dark cave? Well, none of that really talks about how to live in a dark cave. How the creatures adapt to cave life? Again, none of that really talks about adapting to cave life. The ulm's features, does the ulm have small limbs, less than 1 foot long, white skin, underdeveloped eyes? Yes, all those details work together to make that main idea. So in that situation, they give them all the details they would have to find the main idea. Occasionally, they'll actually do that in the reverse, where they give them the main idea. They'll have to figure out which details fit along. I think we have an example of that coming up. This would be more of a summarizing example, where they would read a whole passage. In this specific instance, it's about a girl named Callie who she has a big conflict that she agrees to help a neighbor clean up a park, but she also wants to go to the water park, amusement park, with her friend Tara. So then it's just a little summary of the story. At the beginning of the story, Callie feels, and then gives them some words to choose. That's a technology enhanced item where they'd have to drag and drop it from down here into those gray boxes. After speaking with Tamara, she feels and drag and drop. At the end of the story, she feels, drag and drop. So that takes the overall, I don't remember how many paragraphs, about 12 paragraphs, I think. Short paragraphs, not necessarily like 10 line long paragraphs, but it summarizes it down quickly and also kind of specifically focuses on your feelings. We'll see on the next slide, which is one, this is from a test question that they took. I had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There were 5 paragraphs there, and I wrote a little summary for them. Where that last one focused more on Callie's feelings, this focused more on just retelling what they had written here. So it said the first person or people to develop the idea of gum were the blank. In here they had to find where the first were. So it was right here, American Indians. So they had to, wherever American Indians, they'd have to drag that there. I did throw in distractor answers too, because down here they talked about the Mayan Indians. They talk because they had to realize that up here it talks about the American Indians, and here it talks about the Mayan Indians. But if they're looking at this chronologically, the Indians came first, and the Mayans. I would say the biggest mistake I saw with this problem was they switched the two. They knew that the American Indians were one of the first people to use gum. They knew that the Mayan Indians also used gum. I had some students where this was when we were talking about segregation, so I threw in African Americans because that was something we were talking about, and I wanted to see how many of them saw, African Americans, that's something we're talking about in school, so that's probably the right answer. I had a couple students, even though nowhere in the passage doesn't say anything about African Americans. Then it says blubber blubber was never sold because it was too, that is, where is it? Down here, it was too sticky, so I gave them sticky and sweet. So if just look back in the passage, they would have been able to retell that. But I threw in the sweet as a distractor because they know gum is sweet. So that could be a problem why it doesn't fit there. And then the next version of bubble gum was called, and the next one was double bubble. So I put chiclets there. Chiclets had come before blibber blubber, so that I even threw in a little bit of sequencing in there. So you see this question a summarizing question can do a lot of different skills. I had sequencing with the Indians and the Mayans. I had sequencing with the blubber blubber, the double bubble, and the chiclets. Try saying that 5 times fast. And then I also had I had recalling details. So summarizing and main idea, those are going to be kind of all encompassing. You see that I explained to you exactly how I came up with the distractors to throw in there, and that's exactly how the people in the Department of Education are coming up with the distractors. Coming up with ideas that they know will trip up the students, and that's exactly what I did in past life. Maybe this is what I did. Probably make some good money doing that, but it's kind of helpful to try to get inside the heads of why a fourth grader would make that mistake, and also preemptively strike and get into the heads of what a test maker does, correcting answers. Another way that they'll see main idea and summarizing is it will say select the two details that are least important in a summary of paragraphs 1 and 2 of the instructions. So the instructions I didn't include because the instructions are a big thing. So these are all things that come up in paragraphs 1 and 2 of the instructions. They have to figure out which ones are interesting facts, but not really important to overall summary. So homemade paper can be considered a piece of art. Yeah, that's interesting. That's very interesting. I didn't know that really. But is that important? The paragraphs 1 and 2 are kind of talking about why you should do recycled paper. That doesn't really fit. As paper recycling mill, water drips through a long screen. That's maybe later on in the passage where they're talking about how to actually make the recycled paper. But that doesn't fit in with paragraphs 1 and 2. So you see environmental benefits that could be made, it's the paragraphs 1 and 2 are kind of the overall introduction to making homemade paper. So those two things don't really fit in with it, while those other three do. So they kind of have to identify, yes, those 5 things are in the passage somewhere, but just, I guess that would be A, B, and D would be the ones that would be considered important as opposed to interesting. So there are a number of ways to practice main idea. Main idea is actually a skill that, while it is hard for the students to, focus in on, or not focus on details and think of the overall big picture, it's actually a really easy skill to practice with your students. While you're reading with them, what was the most important thing about that page, that chapter, that section, however often you're checking in with them as they're reading. You can ask them to retitle that page, retitle that chapter. That's really good because basically chapter titles are a quick snippet of main idea of that whole thing. So that's an activity we do in guided reading a lot of time. They're little guided reading books, chapter titles, and I'll say, go back to that chapter title because it's all 14 pages total. I tell them, retitle that section. So they have to reread the section and figure out what's most important. They actually, most of the time, come up with a better title than what the book publishers do. You can have them ask what it's mostly about, or just have a brief detail. If you want to really challenge them, say that they need to retell that chapter or page or however long you're breaking it up in like 3 sentences, because that is, or B, focus in on what's most important. Because 3 sentences, when I ask them to write 3 sentences in a paragraph overall, but when they're just talking, 3 sentences, they'll find is pretty easy. So they need to really trim the fat and get right to the main idea. They can ask, you can also, are there any details that are important to include in a summary? Rather than saying not important, just say, are there, well, you can say not important, but make sure you preface that with saying, are there any details that are interesting but not really important? Because you don't ever want to discount whatever an author has done and say that it's not important, or it's, you never want to say something in writing or reading is very important. If they pick up on the small details, point out that it was only a small amount. When I showed you with the poem, I showed you that only 2 or 4 lines. You got to think over the overall big picture. You can always encourage them to reread it. That's going to be the best strategy. Studies have shown multiple repetitions not only builds fluency and accuracy, it also does build comprehension. That's why I try to get them in the habit of always reading things twice, because I only read through it once, and then when Mrs. Burke jumped on and made corrections, I saw things that I hadn't seen when I was typing it. So it would have been helpful for me to go back, because it's embarrassing that on every slide she had to make some sort of correction. So that's a good thing. Make sure that they're always rereading their things. When we're in Daily 5 or guided reading, I'll tell them we read it out loud as a group, and then I go back and they have to do it the second, and they have to also go back and answer the questions. And if they get it wrong, I tell them, I don't let them go into the next page. I say, no, you need to go find your answer, prove it to me, and then you can move on. So for finding their answers, and that's even when you're reading with them at home, without making it too much of a struggle. Say the same thing, hold them accountable, and throw me under the bus. If they're giving you trouble, say, well, Mr. B does this in class. I'll tell him that you're not doing it at home. And then they'll be like,
I use that all the time.
Good, I encourage that. Next skill we're going to be talking about are context clues. Context clues are basically words that the students may not know the meaning of, but they need to deduce or figure out from the words or sentences around it, or simply fill in the blank. What I mean by that is it might give them a word that they don't know, but it'll say what is the meaning of this word. So what they can do is take that word out and put all the answer choices in until they find a word that makes sense. My groups in Daily 5, that's actually what we did for the past week and week and a half. We had our context clue packet. So I said every time it says, what's the meaning of this? Just go back to that passage, highlight that word, and just go, like the dog had a robust bark. So they would have to go, the dog had a small bark. Does that make sense now? Does the dog have a loud bark? Does that make sense? Yeah, well, let's check all the other answers. So they have to always go back. They can really just fill in the blank and find the word that way. A question about context clues could be a known word, which generally speaking, if it's a known word, it's not going to trip them up. A completely unknown word, which generally they might, that will trip them up. A word with multiple meanings. If you think about it, a lot of words in the English language don't mean just one thing, they mean multiple things. So they'll have to figure out which way it was used in that specific sentence. Or a word that they have heard before, but they might not have seen in print. And that will trip them up. As soon as I tell them the word, for instance, intrigued. That was a word that was in our skill packet this past week. And I've used that word list. I think I have an example of it. But they need to figure out the antonym. Oh, they need to figure out A, what the word means, which is they would have to use the context clues from the passage. And then they need to find, not only do I need to know what the word means, I also need to find the opposite, or if it's a synonym, they just need to find the same ones. So for this example, these are basically two that I have here. Here it says, as it is used in the selection, the word classified most likely means to, and arrange in groups. So they're talking here, this whole passage is kind of about how they arrange different animals, and so they have to talk about arranging groups. Tell apart easily, that's very similar to classifying groups. When you're talking, especially about animals, you might have multiple different species that you use different words to tell apart easily, so that would be the good answer. Keep secret, that would be the bad answer. There's nothing in there to indicate that they're keeping secrets, and the enjoy family members also bad answer. Don't think anything in there indicates anything about family members. So you can see that the arranging groups is better because that's what they're talking about, how they are classifying them into different things. Tell apart easy is kind of the distracting answer here. So right here, it says, I hide my eyes behind my hands and lean against a tree. So what they could do here is literally take that word out, take lean out, just put one in. So I hide my eyes behind my hand and bend away against the tree. It's awkward to even just say. I hide my eyes behind my hands and rest against the tree. That makes sense. I mean, if they're using background knowledge, when you're hiding, you generally rest. I hide my eyes behind my hands and sit down against the tree. Kind of, but if you're thinking about it, if you're sitting down against a tree, you're probably sitting and you're looking out. But
if you're sitting, you're not going anywhere. She said, he said, go.
Yeah. So then I hide my eyes behind my hands and I climb up a tree. Well, she's hiding her eyes behind a tree. I don't know how many people climb a tree while having their eyes closed. That's generally going to end badly. Push forward against the tree. You're not going to be pushing the tree. Walk around the tree. Again, if you're trying to walk around a tree while you're covering your eyes, probably not going to end bad, and better than climbing the tree with your eyes closed. But so really, if they just plug in each word, that's a really quick, easy, foolproof way to pick the correct word. Next, okay, I'll talk about this one and then I'll talk about these two. Which two words are synonym for heap? So they would have to find heap in the story, and then find the two that are synonyms. So for heap, they probably talked about he came home from school and threw his clothes down in a heap. So they would have to hit pile and mound. So they would have to look back in the story, figure out what heap meant, and then focus in on synonyms. Luckily, in that situation, there are really no antonyms of heap in there, so they would get distracted on that. But I would pretty much bet that they would say which two words are antonym for heaps, but then they would have pile and mound, just kind of throw them off because they need to focus in on the antonym and the definition. These two questions, this kind of takes context clues to the next level. It'll give them like in this situation, this is one that they actually took, and this is one that I got from the Department of Education. So in each one, they have a word that's an unknown. I chose serrated because I figured that's a word that not many students had heard, but there was enough in the paragraph to try to figure out what serrated meant. Here they chose ability, which they pretty much know what ability means, but they had to figure out what that was. So for serrated, they had to figure out that it's talking about its teeth, and when its teeth is happening, it talks about serrated here again, and it's talking about the serrated is sawing it and tearing apart. But it doesn't say that serrated means massive, and it doesn't mean that serrated means bites. They had to pick up on, they might not have known what serrated meant. A lot of them got to that word, did not pronounce it, asked me what serrated meant. I couldn't tell them because as soon as I told them, that kind of defeats the purpose of that question. But so they did pretty well in that one overall as a class. We did one a couple of weeks ago about the Civil War where the underlined word was decimated. And they had to figure out that decimated had meant destroyed. I think the word was destroyed and attacked were the bold words that they had to choose. So that's kind of really focusing them in on the process of how to do context clues. But there might be an unknown word, but if you use the words around it, you can pretty much figure out exactly what it means. That's exactly what this one does too. It says abilities right there. They had to pick up on skills and talent. Ability revolves around your skills and your talent. So the best way to practice is simply to read a lot with your students, because the best way to combat problems with context clues is to increase student vocabulary. This is a really cool study that they did in 1987, so that's not a while ago really, but watch what I'm going to say here, but it's around 30 years ago. So the research probably has progressed. They showed that if a student reads 20 minutes every day from pretty much, I think it's from kindergarten to 6th grade, by the time of that means they're reading 3,600 minutes a school year. That means by the end of 6th grade, they've read 60 days worth of reading, which is 2 whole months. Student B who only reads 5 minutes a day will have only read 12 days. And they didn't even figure out their for student C. If the student is reading 20 minutes each day, by the end of the year, or I think it's by the end of the school year, they will have encountered over 1 million words. I don't remember if that's necessarily by the end of the year or by the end of the whole study, but even so, 1 million words is a lot. If they've only read 5 minutes, they've less than even a third of a million. And if they're only reading 1 minute, less than 10,000. So you will see the more they read, the more vocabulary that they're going to develop. What I've noticed a lot with this class specifically, it's not necessarily always the comprehension that trips them up. It's a lot of the times the comprehension. This really, it's not the comprehension that trips them up, it's the comprehension. It's the vocabulary that trips them up. I noticed this a lot when we were taking our Virginia Studies benchmark and our math benchmark. There were a lot of words that were used, that they know the mathematical process, that they know the fact about it, but they use words like, I'm trying to think off the top of my head, experience, examine, words that are a little bit more robust vocabulary than just test or saw. And they need to see those words, they need to hear those words obviously, but they need to see them in print a lot, because that's the only way to make those connections. And so reading with them, minimum 20 minutes a night, even 25 minutes, you'll see that will add another almost 1,000 minutes for the year. They really need to be reading. If they haven't been reading 20 minutes a night, we have about a month and a half before that as well, so you can really do tremendous things. A lot of students have been working very, very hard in this class and have been made huge amounts of improvement over the last advisor. They really need to keep at it. Just celebrating success is great, but you always want to get to the next step. I'm working on my master's, as I've mentioned before, and I'm at like a plateau, if you will. I'm 80% done with it. I started last May, so I've been really booking it. And I just got up before I came here. I just got off the phone with my mentor, and I was going to take like a little break. But then she's like, "Well, you can do it with your summer school class and kind of continue on." Hopefully, I should be done with my master's before the school year even starts next year. So I'm going to use that with my students tomorrow. That yes, I'm at a level where I got to 80% of my master's really quickly, but I'm not satisfied with that. I want to get to the next. You always want to be building upon yourself. On language art, on IXL, there is a language art. There is a math section of IXL. There's also a language arts section. When you log into IXL, rather than pressing math, you'll just press language arts. This is going to cover a lot of those grammar skills, especially those skills that were kind of lacking on the benchmark. this is where they can make up a lot of it. The language arts section doesn't have the comprehension skills per se. According to Axdale, they've been working on this, but they've been working on that for as long as I've been teaching, so I don't have high hopes on the comprehension part coming out. But MM3, NN3, that's going to be, that one's synonyms, that one's antonyms, and VV3, that is kind of using a dictionary entry to figure out which context clues to work. As they're reading, they're obviously going to encounter a lot of words that they don't know, especially if they're reading above grade level, which is always a thing. I always tell them that if you can, challenge yourself a little bit above, read a little bit above. Oh, I need to go back to here. When they're reading 20 minutes a night, that means 20 minutes of quality reading. That doesn't mean reading Captain Underpants or Dive or Wimpy Kid for 20 minutes every night. While those are, good engaging books, those books are written out of second grade and third grade reading level. That's not really helping students in fourth grade. Yeah, they're really cool. That's a really good way to develop a love of reading, but it's not really helping them because none of those words are going to really challenge them. They're not going to learn new words. Yeah, maybe they'll read the million words, but it's going to be like cat, dog, it's like first grade level. But it's not going to develop them. They need to be reading at fourth grade reading level or slightly above. If they don't have the fluency decoding skills to read independently like that, get an audiobook and get the physical book. Let them listen to it, and they can follow along in their book. A reread series of Unfortunate Events is a class, which is either late fifth grade or early sixth grade reading level, but I feel comfortable reading that to the class because studies have shown that students can comprehend 2 grade levels above what they can read, if that makes sense. So if they read on a fourth grade level, they can comprehend a sixth grade level. And a lot of students have the book in their desk and they'll be following along, which I'm a huge fan of because then they're hearing me read it and they're seeing the words, so they're building those connections in their head. You can do that with audiobooks if you don't have time to read with your students, which I understand everybody's very busy. Get an audiobook, get the physical book, throw some headphones on them, make them follow along in their book because then they're going to hear it. They're going to see the printed word. It's all going to tie together. When they come to the words that they don't know, try to have them find out the meaning with the sentence around it. If they still can't do that, you can either tell them what the word means, or you can work with them on their dictionary skills. That is guide words and reference materials. Guide words are basically just the top couple words on a dictionary, if you have a physical dictionary. It's just these words here and here. The words I mean, like this is the first word on the page and that's the last page on the word. And using guide words is basically just an advanced form of alphabet, putting things in alphabetical order. See, right there, I didn't know my vocabulary. But so basically using guide words is just putting things in alphabetical order, just a really glorified version of it. What kind of talk on?
Are they supposed to be proficient in finding words in the dictionary?
We're going to kind of talk about what they need to be proficient in. They don't necessarily need to be proficient in give them a word and then they need to find it specifically. It's more give them the word and give them some guide words and figure out which words it would fall into. I'm going to get into that on how to practice that. At this point, they don't need to be proficient in go find the word armadillo, and they have to take the whole 600-page dictionary and find it. What they're proficient in, that they need to be proficient in, is you give them either the word and then a couple guide words that it could be in between. They have to figure out where it would be, or the reverse side. They give them some guide words, and then they'd have to figure out which word would be in between that. But I'm going to get into that. We're also going to talk about reference materials, which reference materials include a couple things. One reference material is obviously the dictionary. The way they're going to see that is which dictionary guide entry is used. Thesaurus, which is just one of these, it just gives you better, it just improves the word choice. It gives a bunch of synonyms and antonyms for words. And a glossary, which I don't know if I have one of those handy. I don't know what one. But it's basically in the back of a book. Oh, I do. There's one inside. In the back of a science textbook or Virginia Studies textbook, little guided reading book. Don't fail me now. But right here. They have a glossary, which is basically just a really simplified version of the dictionary that pertains to the things within the book. Common mistakes is not going to be is going to take time to find out if a word given would not be falling between the two guide words on the top of the dictionary page. Basically, what that boils down to is not taking the time say their alphabet and make sure that the words would actually fall. By 4th grade, I don't think I've ever encountered a student that doesn't know their alphabet by the song. So worst case scenario, they can always, sing the song and put things in order, not knowing how to alphabetize or not knowing what the purpose for each reference material is. They might, or this kind of also goes back to the whole context clues thing. The word thesaurus, they've heard me say that multiple times. They know exactly what a thesaurus is. They'll say, well, Mr. B, what's a better word for set? I said, I don't know, go get a thesaurus and figure it out. But then when they see the word in print, this happened on the benchmark. One question said, where would I find a synonym for set? I'll just use that as a good example. One of the words was thesaurus, and one student pointed, he's like, I don't know what this word means. And I was like, and during a reading benchmark, I can't read anything for them, but I almost want to be like, I don't know what that word means. Let's figure it out. Also, you don't want to confuse them and think that a thesaurus is a kind of dinosaur, because I remember when I was in 2nd grade, I heard thesaurus and I got excited that we were going to be talking about dinosaurs that day, and then out of nowhere she brought out a bunch of books and I was slightly less enthused. So those are the 3 main reference materials. They'll be exposed to other ones, but those are the 3 that are actually going to be tested on the ASL. So guide words and reference questions would be worded a couple ways. Which word from the poem would appear on the same page as the guide words? Which words would be found on these guide words? So there's kind of the flip side. This one is, those are actually the same questions. Which dictionary entry is used in paragraph blank? So it'll give them a dictionary definition, and that kind of ties in with context clues a little bit. Which reference material would be most likely to find the synonym antonym? So if they say something in which reference material is asking for synonym antonym, they need to know the source. The source doesn't give definitions, it just gives better words. The meaning of, or the part of speech of, and then that would be, if it says meaning, in theory, they could say pick dictionary, they could pick the source, or this is a glossary, because a glossary does give the meaning of words. If it says about part of speech, they really have to pick dictionary, but an argument could be made for thesaurus because of thesaurus, thesauri, I don't know what the plural of that is, do include the part of speech thing. So reference materials, they just need to know what each one is used for. They don't necessarily need to be able to know exactly, this is exactly how you use a thesaurus, this is exactly how you use a dictionary, this is exactly how you use a glossary. It's more, what would you use those for, an example. So a couple of ways to practice this. It says, so these are kind of flip side questions. Here it gives the guide words, and they would need to figure out which words would fit in between scale and sky. And so what they would have to do is see S, and they all start with S, so they'll all be good. This kind of goes back to the comparing and ordering thing with decimals, checking each one. C, so they could still continue because they're all after C. Then they'd have to check here. K, so they see S, the SP and ST, they'd have to cross those ones off because those come before or after K. So basically have to do process of elimination using the alphabet one letter at a time until they're left with whatever they were. So they'd be, really all they have to do there is just go 2 letters in there because SE, 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 ST, 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 they don't even have to go to the rest of the letters. They just need to go 1 letter at a time. Kind of like what we were talking about last week with, they need to stack them up and make sure that they're circling place values and so on and so forth. This is kind of the reverse of that question, where in this one they were given the guide words and they had to figure out which words would go in between. This one they're given the word. They would have to figure out which guide words goes in between. So they would take B-R-I-G, B-R-I-C. So it's not going to fit there. B-R-I-G, B-I-R-E, that makes sense so far. B-R-I-L, that would make sense, but they have to check all of them. So it's really just checking that each letter would fit in between each set of letters. And this is what I was talking about with the reference material, the online dictionary entry. They just need to choose that. So they would have to go back to paragraph 4 and figure out. So support has 5 definitions, so they have to figure out which definition is used in that specific instance. So ways to practice this: IXL Language Arts VV1 and WW1. I think that's going to be dictionary skills. I looked it up last night. Those are things that will help. You can actually use an actual dictionary, thesaurus, or glossary to look up words. One really fun thing that could be is have a race. Both of you get a dictionary, and you obviously look ahead of time to figure out like where the word is, and give them, say, look up this word. And you want to give them a range of pages. Normally I give them about 10 pages of a range when they're doing the morning work. They're supposed to use the guide words and figure out which one it is. So just race them. Feel free to beat them the first couple times by using the guide words. That'll kind of motivate them to actually learn how to do the guide words a little bit faster. You could give them a word and then some potential guide words, and they would have to figure out which side of guide words would appear on the same page as the word you just gave. They don't actually have to find the word or anything. They just need to figure out which word. Using a dictionary helps tremendously. I will tell you this from experience. When I was trying to write test questions and I would pick a word and I don't have a dictionary in my house, because I just use dictionary.com, because I have a very small apartment and even every little space counts. So I would have to think, I was like, all right, what words would possibly be on the same page? What if you say, like, so let's say I just opened here to integrity. And here I would just take these guide words, and these guide words, and just give them those three set of guide words and say, where would integrity fall in between? You have to write it down so they know how to spell integrity. Or you can reverse it. You can give them some guide words. So let's go to a different section. I'll use economically editorial, efficient, or efficiently, and apparently word. And just give them a word and say, where would that fall on those ones I just gave you? So again, using dictionary is going to be helpful. I really should just take a dictionary to my house, so when I'm making test questions, it's a little bit easier. Dictionary.com doesn't have that nice here's guide words feature. But yeah, dictionary. I know the third graders this current year, got dictionaries from the Rotary Club. I think last year they all got dictionaries too, so they all have dictionaries. So no excuses. And same thing, do it with the thesaurus, or just get a thesaurus or whatnot and say, well, if I want you to find me a synonym of this word, which reference material would you use? If I wanted a definition of a science word, where would I most likely use? Really, the big difference between a glossary and a dictionary. Dictionary is going to go to polar speeds, pronunciation, all that kind of stuff. Every single definition. Glossary is just going to give them what they need for just that specific unit or what have you. All right, so we are coming to the closing. Couple of things that are really important to take a listen to. Use the strategies, everything, IXL, reading. Really, if you took nothing out of what I just said, read within 20 minutes a night. By the end of 6th grade, they'll know 1 million words, which was something cool. They can brag about that. All those examples that I just showed you are from the Department of Education. If you go onto my website and you download this, you don't actually need to download it. You just press view. The presentation I just gave, you click on this link. That's going to give you a detailed breakdown of everything that 4th graders last year missed. They also do have one for what 3rd graders missed last year, so that would be like your kids, what they missed last year. It'd be helpful to check that out, see if your particular student is struggling, and it also gives ways to improve that. So that's a really good resource. I've been holding off on giving you guys that link because they update it every spring. It'd be helpful if they updated in like the fall, so then I'd have them for the whole year. Yes? Virginia Department of Education. Yeah. You can kind of navigate through the website. There's a whole lot of stuff on there. It's really easy to get lost on that website too if you don't know what you're clicking through. But that link right there will take you right through it. You check the website frequently, especially my classroom website. Check it very frequently between now and SOLs because a lot of changes happen really quickly. I'm going to open up the website and show you the calendar because everything that I just said last time about the homeschool connection nights and the SOLs just changed yesterday. So I'm going to walk you through that because a lot of major changes that just happened yesterday, which is why tonight has to be the last reading homeschool connection night. I'll show you that in a second. After I'm all done and stop the broadcast, make sure you do the feedback slip on the very last slide, and I'll see you guys on Tuesday for our math homeschool connection night. I'm going to go ahead and open up. That is okay. Classroom calendar. Originally, I had told you guys that the Virginia Studies SOL was going to be here, the reading SOL is going to be here, the math is going to be here and here. Because the Board of Education in Virginia just approved the expedited retakes, which basically means that if your child fails by a certain margin, They can retake the test. I have mixed feelings on that, but that's neither here nor there. That means that everything, the whole school, we needed to shift our SOLs up about 10 days to make room for if there are retakes. That's a whole nother issue, but we'll talk about that. We won't talk about that. I mean. Which meant that then I had to shift all the homeschool connection nights in May, so I'm very happy I didn't actually send out the RSVPs yet. Until I get word from Mrs. Waters that the SOL schedule is finalized, everything on May is going to say tentative or potential until we actually get the official word that it is finalized. I'm telling you this now, but just continue checking the website. But as of now, this is what the schedule is. On May 5th, which is a Tuesday, that's going to be a math night. That is going to be one where you guys are going to be able to pick the topics of what you want me to review in math. I've already made the permission slip, I just haven't sent it out yet. But I've listed all the different standards, all 39 of them, or however many there are. I didn't list all 39, I listed like the streams, because I don't want to kill a tree every time I want to send one home. You'll pick like the 5 that you want covered, and then I'll pick the most common ones. At that night, we will also go over the SOL formats for math, for reading, and for Virginia Studies. I'll cover pretty much everything that you'll need to know for SOLs. So that's going to be a big review for you guys. I'm not going to go super in depth on everything like I have been. I'm going to kind of touch on things, model examples, but the bulk of that night is going to be dedicated to walking you through the SOL process, basically, because it's a little bit different than 3rd grade. Go ahead. Okay. May 12th, it's a Tuesday. That is going to be the Virginia Studies SOL night, the homeschool connection night. That is going to be from 6:30 to 8. That one has to be a little bit longer because it's 400 years of stuff that I have to cram into one night. It took me 9 months to do that with your students. I'm going to cram it into 90 minutes for you guys.
So it's
from 6:30 to 8. Normally they're 7 to 8, but since it's a lot of stuff. Hopefully I will have one of the end of the year videos that I'm going to be filming with your students. I don't know if you saw last year, I filmed like a SOL video with my students. We're doing 2 this year. Hopefully one of them will be done by then. So we will actually show you that if you haven't checked that out on YouTube. But that is going to be a very crucial night because you're going to learn 400 years of stuff in 90 minutes, which is going to be very helpful. I am also, in the near future, going to be sending home a very comprehensive study guide that will look like this. So make sure you're looking for this probably. I don't know if I'm going to send it home tomorrow or next week. This will cover every single thing that is going to be on the SOL. I don't have a digital copy, but I'll scan one, put it on the website, so if you lose it, or more aptly, if your student loses it, you can always download a new one. But this is going to be a very, very, very good resource. It's going to cover every single thing that they need to know for Virginia history. And some of it is already in question format, but you can use it as question format. But
that's going to be on the classroom.
Students are going to get a paper copy either tomorrow or next week, and I will scan in a digital copy on the classroom website too.
So this is called what? Look out for what?
Virginia Studies or it's called Virginia Studies SOL Home Review. That's what that's called. It'll come home in, I haven't quite. I'm going to wait till they finalize all the dates before I start sending SOLs. Because I love when they change the dates. And then the very last homeschool connection night, that's the students versus parents one that I've been kind of talking about. Haven't really told the students about it quite yet, but that'll be a fun time. It'll be May 18th. That's going to be from 6 to 8. That one, the reason it's 6 to 8 is because we're going to play the game with the students. Very important to also know there will be no childcare that night because Mrs. Burke is going to be in here with Gracie, also battling. So even if you have students, kids of other ages, feel free to bring them. They can sit with their sibling or with you guys, or they can be on the kids team or the adults team, whatever. But so as of now, like I said, tentative. As soon as I know that everything is finalized, I will change that to reflect it. Pretty much when you get the link that says the RSVP for Homeschool Connection Night, that basically means everything's finalized. But check the website frequently. I probably update that more than I update Class Messenger, which is probably hard to believe because you get Class Messenger from me like every other day half the time. But yeah, check the website. That's going to be a really good resource for everything. I was doing so great for a while getting done. Do we have any questions?